The Hurricanes and the Flyers in the driver's seat early. Welcome to NHL Wraparound Stanley Cupdate for Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. Vic and Neil with you after an eventful Monday evening, and for two teams, they are taking two-game leads with venue changes coming up.
Yeah, and very different for both these series because the Philadelphia Flyers now go home with a 2-0 lead over the Pittsburgh Penguins. And the Carolina Hurricanes, of course, go on the road up to Ottawa with a 2-0 lead. I'd rather be Ottawa going home than be Pittsburgh going on to the road and having to try to dig their way back out of this hole. But nevertheless, it's a lot of work for both of these teams.
Let's start in Carolina, where we saw a little bit of history, some pretty unusual stuff going on during the course of this game. And you would mention how sick and tired you are of Brady Tkachuk with his stage fights at the beginning of games. Did you know that the Senators all-time are 12, 28, and 3 when Tkachuk fights in a game?
Yeah, which doesn't lead you to thinking that he should do it that often.
Well, he probably shouldn't. And to compound matters for the Senators going in, defenseman Artem Zub was out with an undisclosed injury. I'm sure that's going to be the catchphrase for injuries now throughout the entire playoffs because we're getting bored with upper and lower body. Early on in this game, Tim Stützle, who has had numerous chances in both games 1 and 2, missed an open net, and then Logan Stankoven for the Hurricanes, who has not only contributed offensively, but he pulls one off of the goal line. With those breaks in hand, the Hurricanes break out of the box. It's Stankoven scoring with Tkachuk in the penalty box, taking a needless neutral zone penalty against Sebastian Aho, which leads to the goal.
That was an undisciplined penalty in the neutral zone. Stankoven has just been terrific for Carolina. Every game you notice this guy, he's not very big, but boy, has he been good for the Carolina Hurricanes.
I thought as this game went on, you thought maybe Carolina was going to blow this thing open. They got to a 2-0 lead in the second period, but the Senators, to their credit, come back, goals by Drake Batherson, and then Dylan Cousins. And I texted you right after this goal because it was a leaky goal given up by Freddie Anderson, who played very well again. But this is the kind of thing that it may not bite the Hurricanes early in the playoffs, but if they move on, these are the kind of goals that have haunted Anderson in later series and later on in series at the same time.
Yeah, and nobody can have those goals go in on them and be successful in the playoffs, and no team can. We saw it with Dallas last year with Oettinger. And so, yeah, they're not going to get real far if he allows any goals like that to go in. You might get away with it in the first round, but as the series go on, you got to be more and more careful that they got to earn whatever they get behind your goaltender.
I thought after Ottawa tied this game, they were the better team for, I would say, the latter part of the second period and much of the third period. But it was Linus Ullmark towards the end of regulation who made a terrific save in close on Jordan Staal to get this game in overtime. And then once the overtime started, Anderson made a big stop on Brady Tkachuk, and then Tim Stützle hit a goal post. So you could see Ottawa was right there with Carolina this entire night.
Yeah, and this is all going to be part of the mental aspect for Ottawa, saying to themselves, we're right there, we're not out of this. This should be, at the very worst, 1-1. So, guys, don't be down about coming home down 2-0. We'll win our 2 home games and go right back. There's a lot of self-talk that you do at a point in the playoffs like this where you convince yourself that you're still in this series and you're still going to win this series.
The Hurricanes thought that they won this game late in the first overtime, and this was a sequence I don't think that we have ever seen before. So Seth Jarvis took a shot. Mark Jankowski banged home a rebound, but upon review, the play was ruled offside because Jordan Staal was ruled to have preceded the puck into the offensive zone. He was not in full control. I think that is a little bit debatable. But lost in all this, Staal got the puck to Jordan Martinook, who went in on Ullmark and was slashed by Warren Foegele. Even though the goal was disallowed, Martinook was awarded a penalty shot.
You never see that in the playoffs, and especially in overtime and on a slash. You usually see it on a trip or something like that, but not on a slash. So that is a first for everybody.
Correct. First time ever, an overtime penalty shot in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Martinook came in, glove saved by Ullmark, and we play on. And middle of the second overtime, Michael Amadio hit a post behind Freddie Anderson, so the game goes on. And perhaps there was some poetic justice here because Martinook winds up scoring with 6:07 left in the second overtime. And I thought from probably the midway point of the first overtime, the Hurricanes were the better team.
Yeah, they seemed to take the play then to Ottawa. They got Ottawa worn down. They got them tired in their zone and kept control of the puck. And I guess it is a bit of poetic justice that Martinook ends up with the winning goal after not being able to put in the penalty shot.
You talked about the mental piece for Ottawa. They head home for Game 3 on Thursday, 7:30 p.m. on TBS. They get an extra day off here. Is that extra day going to be that significant for the Senators here as they try to regroup? Because there's obviously the physical piece, but there's that mental piece that you have played close to 8 periods of hockey and you've played relatively well for most of it and you got nothing to show for it.
Well, no, but that's the whole point, though, that you say to yourself and you say to each other, we've been right in this. We're not out of this at all. It could have been just a bounce here, a bounce there, and we're up 2-0. So that's what you convince yourself of. Is the extra day off of benefit? Absolutely, because maybe Artem Zub can get back into the lineup with an extra day off to get healthy. Your little bumps and bangs and bruises on both sides will be a lot better for that extra 24 hours.
Also up 2-0, the Philadelphia Flyers winning both games in Pittsburgh. This one by a score of 3-0, 27 save effort by goaltender Dan Vladar. And what impressed me here was that you knew that the Penguins were going to push early here and try to rebound off of that Game 1 loss. But once Flyers were able to weather that storm, they get the first goal based on an extended shift that the Penguins were on the ice. And it's Porter Martone scoring his second goal of the playoffs late in the second period. This kid looks like the real deal here, and he's actually been compared to Corey Perry, and that's quite a comparison.
It is, and he is the real deal at 19 years old, and he has been just great for them so far in these playoffs. He doesn't look out of place at all, and you got to love the way Tippett plays the game. They got Tippett into Philadelphia in a trade with the Florida Panthers. That's the Claude Giroux trade back a number of years ago, but what a great pickup this is for them. Owen Tippett has been fantastic. He outworked Novak and Letang to feed Hathaway the puck, and he has just been a terrific player for them.
That was the second goal for the Flyers to make it 2-0 heading into the third period. And you know things are going good when Hathaway scores for you, and he had 1 goal and 2 assists in 66 games during the course of the regular season.
But strange things happen in the playoffs, and that's what you need. Contributions from guys who are down the roster a little ways. You don't expect them. And during the regular season, you might not get very much from them offensively, but all of a sudden in the playoffs, they put in a goal here or a goal there, and it matters immensely in winning a series.
Stu Skinner has played pretty well for the Penguins in this series to this point, and in the third period, he actually stopped a 2-0 combination of Sean Couturier feeding Luke Glendening, so it stayed 2-0, and this came on a Penguins power play. We didn't say this before, but the goal by Hathaway was a shorthanded goal, so you can see that there are all sorts of areas that the Penguins game is really struggling here.
Yeah, they sure are. And it reminds you of the Penguins that we saw last season, not the Penguins we saw this season.
Well, you had mentioned Owen Tippett a little while ago, and he wound up getting a penalty shot in the third, the second of the night. But the way that play developed, Neil, there was a face-off in the Flyers' own end of the ice, and the puck came out towards the point, and Tippett blew through everybody to get that opportunity. And even though he didn't score on the penalty shot, there was something to be said about the hop that the Flyers have here, their drive, their energy, and it's wearing the Penguins down.
Right, it sure is, and the perhaps you want to say the youthfulness of the Flyers, the exuberance of the Flyers, the fact that most of their guys have not been in these situations, whereas a lot of the Penguins have been in this. This is, later in their careers, but they're getting another chance in the playoffs. A lot of these Philadelphia Flyers are doing it for the first time, and they're really up. You can see how excited and exuberant they are.
You could see the Penguins' frustration at the end of game one. Sidney Crosby getting into it with Travis Sanheim, and late in game two was Chris Letang and Parker Weatherspoon taking a couple of bad penalties. But overall, the 45 shots on goal combined in games 1 and 2, and 77 that have missed the net or have been blocked. And this is another example of the Flyers willing to do the small things in order to get the Penguins off their game. Their offense has disappeared so far. Sidney Crosby has 1 goal in his last 13, dating back to the end of the regular season. This is almost like Dallas in that conference final last year against the Edmonton Oilers, where all of the forwards that they were counting on all year are dried up, and the same thing happening here. Nothing from Malkin, nothing from Mantha, nothing from Kindle, and of course, nothing from Crosby.
And now it gets even harder going into Philadelphia. You're never sure whether or not the home ice is going to be a benefit or not to the home team. Is it going to be a benefit to the road team? But I suspect in this situation, with the Flyers not having had a playoff game in such a long time, that it'll be raucous in there, and the Flyers are going to have to go out and strike early in game 3 to put a little stranglehold, and not a little stranglehold, but a stranglehold on the series.
Sometimes a club will come back home and actually start to play outside of what made them successful, and I think the Flyers have to be guarded against that. And perhaps for the Penguins, going on the road, the pressure is now off them a little bit, even though they were the favorite of this series, and maybe they can get back to the game that made them successful during the course of the regular season.
Yeah, absolutely. Doing the little things. Dan Muse has had a great season as coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm sure he'll have adjustments that he'll want to make going onto the road. The good thing for the Flyers is they get the last change at home, which will make the line matchups a lot easier for Rick Tocchet.
Game 3, Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern on TNT. The last series to get underway on Monday was Edmonton and Anaheim, and the Oilers come away with a 4-3 victory. Big news down the middle for Edmonton. Leon Draisaitl returning for 14 games with a lower body injury, and Jason Dickinson coming back after missing the final 3 games of the regular season. Pretty good for the Oilers getting their number 2 and 3 centers back.
Jason Dickinson, remember, got traded at the deadline from Chicago to Edmonton. Perhaps Stan Bowman, knowing Dickinson in the Chicago Blackhawks, or at least having watched him a lot, and knew what he was getting, and Dickinson certainly didn't let him down in this game.
I like the way that Anaheim started this game. They actually had a goal waved off Tim Washy, goalie interference with Connor Ingram, who was starting in net for the Oilers. He had played 3 games previously in the 2022 playoffs for Nashville, was 0-3, so this was his first postseason action since then. But after that initial push to start the game by the Oilers, I found Anaheim to be pretty responsible in terms of their defensive game, which we know has been lacking during the latter part of the regular season. But then Dickinson and Kapanen score 1 minute apart, and before you know it, it was a 2-0 lead for the Oilers going into the locker room.
Yeah, and on that home ice where that crowd is just crazy in Edmonton. Hockey is everything to them, and their Oilers are everything. And boy, the team didn't let them down in this one.
Troy Terry and Leo Carlsson scored early in the second period to tie the game, and then it was Terry later in the period, and the Ducks are ahead 3-2. And as we started to watch this final stanza, I thought maybe Anaheim was going to get away with this one and prevail in this game. One of the things I was looking at was the zone entries of the Oilers, and particularly Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. They like to come down that right side on the rush. And the Ducks were doing a really good job double teaming. Their gap control was really strong. But there are other aspects of their game that just fall apart defensively, and that's what led to their downfall in this one. The second goal that was scored in the first period by Kasperi Kapanen, neutral zone turnover by Kreider, and then really a slow close in the slot by Beckett Seneca. And then on the third goal, the tying goal that was scored by Dickinson, Radko Gudas blows a tire, which I'm sure made Auston Matthews pretty sad. But on the ensuing play, it was Seneca again that was slow to close in the slot, and that left Dickinson wide open for a rebound. And then on the game-winning goal, it was Kreider that was slow getting to Kapanen with under 2 minutes left. So these are correctable things, but there are also things that we have seen all season long with the Ducks when it comes time to defend, that high forward is just slow on the close in that slot area, and it left Lucas Dostal hung out to dry.
Yeah, it did, and I'm sure that Joel Kenville will bring this up to his group, and there'll be a lot of video to watch, and he'll tell them about their missed assignments on these goals. But we've known all season that the Anaheim Ducks are a team that can score in bunches. They can really score goals, but they do miss assignments in their own end.
Something that's got to get cleaned up, and very quickly. We mentioned it. They played well in this game, but those defensive shortcomings remain glaring. But something else I found interesting, the first line, Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman, Matt Savoy, held off the score sheet, but Leon Draisaitl, Kasperi Kapanen, and Vasily Podkolzin wind up with 6 points, and Dickinson with a pair of goals. So that support scoring, it can come from different places, and this is going to be increasingly important for the Oilers if they are going to move on.
Oh, of course, because everybody's focused on McDavid, Hyman, and Savoy. And, you know, if you've got a second line and then a third line that can come through for you, it makes all the difference in the world. And we've talked about it. This is what you need in the playoffs. You need the guys who normally don't get a lot of offense created during the regular season, that when all eyes are on the big guys, you know, you sneak in there with a goal here or a goal there, and that's what pushes teams over the top.
Game 2, Wednesday, 10 o'clock on TBS. And perhaps TBS will avoid the watch party shots that we see in every goal that's scored on coverage with ESPN. And that Edmonton shot just drives me crazy. Every time there's a goal, we have to see watch parties all over the place. I mean, when there's a goal that's scored, it's not a novelty act anymore. Okay, we know that people are excited, but there's no need to default to people celebrating outside the arena on every single goal. It just cheapens the moment for me.
I agree with you. I'm trying to watch the hockey game. I'm not trying to watch fans. You know, I want to see the hockey game. I want to see the hockey players. I mean, I know everybody's celebrating in Edmonton. Of course they are. It's their team. You don't really need to see that. And you don't need to see a shot of a bar in Anaheim where everybody's cheering. We know that that's going on. Show us the hockey players in the hockey game.
Over freaking kill. That's all I have to say about that. Last game of the night, Dallas and Minnesota. And in this game, we learned that Matt Zuccarello was going to be out with an upper body injury. And, of course, the Stars trying to rebound from really a brutal 6-1 loss in Game 1.
Oh, absolutely. That was a terrible loss at home. And you wondered how Dallas would come out for this game.
Jake Ottinger was pretty good early on, and Wyatt Johnston scored the first goal of the game, kind of getting a little bit of a fortunate carom that banked in off Jesper Wallstedt. But the response by Brock Faber to tie the game at 1. But as we see so often in these series, Neil, they start to develop their own personalities. And given how close these teams were in the standings all year, we knew that they were earmarked to meet in the playoffs from back in January. And we saw some real physical play in this one. And the most notable hit was Colin Blackwood hitting Yakov Trenin in the first period. Trenin was listed as having 13 hits in game 1. Of course, we talked about how we regard hits and the way they're tracked. But anyway, in this case, the hunter became the hunted. And this check came on really one of those suicide passes that Zach Bogosian threw towards Trenin. And he's looking down to receive the puck. And boy, did Blackwell lay into him.
You knew that there's going to be some payback to Trenin for all those hits in the first game, and that they're going to say to him, we're not putting up with this stuff. But you never expected to see a hit that hard, and it was a good one by Blackwood.
Also later in the game, though, Marcus Foligno, in the second period, decided to take Thomas Harley's head and run it into the rounded part of the glass. So a lot of piss and vinegar that we're starting to see.
And you knew that was coming with these two teams being this close in the standings. And one of these teams is going down. It's really tough. You know, you've had a season the way Minnesota's had or Dallas has had. They've had good seasons, these two teams, and one is going to be done at the end of the first round. It just seems so ridiculous that one of these teams will be gone.
Matt Duchene scored early in the second for Dallas. Jason Robertson early in the third. Brock Faber got it to 3-2 at the midway point of the final period. But that empty net goal by Wyatt Johnston, which was flipped from the other end of the rink, and Quinn Hughes chased the puck down, and then he kind of stopped. The puck was rolling, and I think that he slowed down thinking that it was going to go over the goal line wide of the net and be an icing call. And then the puck just made a left turn, and Quinn was not able to get to it before it entered the empty net.
All he could do is stand and watch as it went in, and certainly punctuated the game for sure.
One thing that you had pointed out after that first game was that Dallas had to get back to a very detail-oriented game. And even though the Wild did have their chances to tie the game, Jake Ottinger was good. And I thought overall, this was the type of effort that we had expected to see from Dallas in game 1. Came a game late. They do even the series, and at least they're not going to Minnesota down 0-2.
No, exactly. And Minnesota has accomplished what they wanted, which is win one of the two games on the road. They did that in game 1 very convincingly. And it was Dallas that had to regroup, reorganize, retool, whatever you want to use. Yep. And they did it, and give Glenn Gulletson credit. But now that with the series all evened up, it becomes a best 3 of 5.
And we'll see what the status of Zuccarello and Trenin are for that third game, which will take place in Minnesota Wednesday at 9:30 on TNT. So quickly, let's hit Tuesday's schedule. Montreal at Tampa Bay kicks off the night, 7 o'clock, ESPN2. Canadians with a 1-0 series lead. I think, Neil, the one thing for the Tampa Bay Lightning is stop taking penalties in the offensive zone. Teams combined for 5 power play goals in game 1. Juraj Slafkovsky had all 3 for the Canadians. So I think the areas that need to get cleaned up for Tampa are fairly obvious here.
Yeah, they are. And Tampa's got to win this game. Let's face it. They don't want to go to Montreal down 2-0. Tampa's got to go out there and dominate. And then I think they can do this, but we'll see. Montreal is in the driver's seat early here.
Boston at Buffalo, 7:30 on ESPN. The Sabres with that big comeback on Sunday evening. And by the way, I talked about watch parties and shots outside. In that game on Sunday, that actually worked because of the largesse of the moment and the Sabres not hosting a playoff game in 15 years. So I play fair when it needs to be fair. So there was a difference between what I saw in Buffalo Sunday and the continued nonsense from all the shots in Edmonton that come just game after game. But anyway, we talked about the mental piece of this. And for the Bruins that had a 2-0 lead in the third period with less than 8 minutes left, and to let that one get away, this is a big test for Marco Sturm's team to regroup.
Yeah, it is. And they've got to be angry at themselves about letting that game slip away. They could be up 1-0. They're not. They're down 1-0. They'd like to come out of Buffalo with a split. That's what everybody's goal is when you go on the road. And so we will probably see a different Boston team come out on Tuesday night.
Another team looking to even their series, the Utah Mammoth, and they will play at Vegas at 9:30 p.m. on ESPN2. The Golden Knights with a 1-0 series lead, scoring 3 goals in the third period in Game 1. What do you look for from Utah here to try to even the series?
I just think they got to get their offense going a bit more. They've got to get the Dylan Guenthers and their offensive weapons going here in this game to match up with the Golden Knights. And I think they can win this game in Vegas, but they got to stay disciplined and, make sure that they keep an eye on Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner.
Final game of the night will start at 10 o'clock on ESPN. LA Kings, Colorado Avalanche. Avs winning the first game 2-1, but we had noted that this may be, meaning Game 1, the best that the Kings can offer here. And I expect more from the Avs in Game 2.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 2-1 win by Colorado. On paper, it looks like, they just snuck by. I agree with you. I think LA played about as good a game as you're going to be able to play against Colorado. They shut down all those weapons that Colorado has, basically. They only got the 2 goals. It could be a lot different Tuesday night because Colorado now knows what they're facing. And it's just going to be very, very difficult for LA. I think everybody knows that. Early, the most one-sided series everybody thinks of the 8 series that's out there.
By the way, do you notice that the late games are always starting 20 minutes after the start time that's listed?
Why is that, by the way?
Because these games just take longer to play. I mean, usual regular season game plays in about 220, 222, maybe 224. But these games get stretched out. There's more pop and circumstance at the beginning, the whole bit. But none of these later games have been close to the posted start time.
Right, because they've all got to wait, right? They all have to wait for the other games to end before they can start.
Yeah. A lot of tap dancing that goes on there. Reach us individually at Neil@NHLWraparound.com or Vic@NHLWraparound.com. We are on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. Leave a message or subscribe if you tune in via YouTube. We are running polls on the series winners for each of the opening round matchups, so check those out, weigh in, and see how you do. You can also find us on X, Instagram, TikTok, at RayD8.TV, and the new platform that is just launched called Buzzer, BZZR.com. Our website is NHLWraparound.com, and we will be dropping another spring cleaning later on Tuesday. This one will be the Columbus Blue Jackets, and then after that, we'll be tackling the Washington Capitals, Nashville Predators, Winnipeg Jets, and San Jose Sharks, the other teams that did not qualify for the Stanley Cup playoffs. So, thanks for tuning in. Neil and I will return on Wednesday.